In the early 1990s, an unlikely alliance was forming. Nintendo, the undisputed king of video games, and Sony, the electronics powerhouse. Their goal? To create something revolutionary. The project was called PlayStation. It promised to merge Nintendo's game expertise with Sony's CD-ROM technology. The gaming world held its breath in anticipation, but beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Egos clashed, visions differed. The partnership was built on shaky ground. Nintendo, fiercely protective of its gaming empire. Sony, eager to prove itself in a new arena. Both wanted control. Both thought they knew best. Engineers from both companies worked tirelessly. They believed in the potential of their creation. The PlayStation was to be a game changer. It would allow Nintendo's Super Nintendo Entertainment System, SNES, to play CD-ROM games. This was cutting-edge stuff in the early 90s. CDs could hold much more data than cartridges. This meant bigger games, better graphics, full-motion video. But dreams and reality don't always align. As the project progressed, cracks began to show. The stage was set for a dramatic fallout. Little did anyone know this failed partnership would give birth to one of gaming's most iconic brands. In the early 1990s, Nintendo was king. The Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, had revived the gaming industry. The Super Nintendo was continuing this legacy. Mario, Zelda, and Donkey Kong were household names. Nintendo had the market in a chokehold. They dictated terms to developers and retailers alike, but Nintendo wasn't content. CD-ROM technology was on the horizon. It promised to revolutionize gaming. Nintendo knew they needed to adapt, but they were cartridge experts, not CD mavens. Enter Sony. The electronics giant had been eyeing the gaming market for years. They saw it as the next big thing. Sony had the tech know-how Nintendo needed. They were masters of the CD-ROM. A partnership seemed logical, beneficial even. Sony's ambitions, however, went beyond being a mere supplier. They saw gaming as a gateway, a path to dominating living room entertainment. For Nintendo, the partnership was a necessary evil. They needed Sony's technology, but they were wary of giving too much ground. This fundamental difference in outlook would prove to be the partnership's undoing. The PlayStation project began with great promise. It was 1988. Nintendo and Sony shook hands on a deal. The goal was clear. Create a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. Nintendo would handle the games. Sony would provide the CD technology. Together they would push gaming into a new era. Engineers from both companies dove into the work. CD-ROMs could store much more data than cartridges. This meant bigger, more complex games. It meant full-motion video and CD-quality audio. Games could become more cinematic, more immersive. The PlayStation promised to blur the lines between games and interactive movies. By 1991, prototypes were functional. The PlayStation was taking shape. It held the promise of a new gaming frontier. Both Nintendo and Sony were excited about its potential. Little did they know, behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. As the PlayStation project progressed, tensions began to simmer. Nintendo was used to calling the shots. They had built their empire on tight control. Every aspect of their business was carefully managed. Sony, on the other hand, had different ideas. They saw the PlayStation as their entry into gaming. They wanted a say in its direction. Sony envisioned a future where they weren't just a hardware supplier. They wanted to be a major player in the gaming industry. The more Sony pushed, the more Nintendo resisted. The partnership began to strain under the weight of conflicting visions. As 1991 approached, the cracks were widening. The PlayStation project was at a crossroads. Something had to give. The heart of the conflict lay in the contract. What was initially agreed upon now seemed like a raw deal to Nintendo. The contract gave Sony significant control, too much control in Nintendo's eyes. Sony would have the right to license and profit from CD-ROM games. This was a major sticking point. Nintendo had built its empire on licensing fees. The idea of sharing this golden goose was unthinkable. As Nintendo scrutinized the contract, alarm bells rang. They realized the implications too late. Sony would essentially control the platform. They had inadvertently given away the keys to their kingdom. Nintendo's leadership knew they had to act. Behind closed doors, Nintendo's executives plotted. They needed a way out. The contract was binding, but they were determined. The stage was set for a dramatic revelation. The 1991 Consumer Electronics Show, CES, was approaching. June 1991. The Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago. The gaming world's eyes were on Sony. They were set to announce the PlayStation. Years of work were about to be unveiled. Sony's Olaf Olofsson took the stage. He proudly presented the fruit of Sony and Nintendo's partnership. The audience was impressed. The future of gaming seemed clear, or so everyone thought. The very next day, Nintendo dropped a bombshell. In a stunning move, they announced a partnership with Philips, not Sony. Philips would be providing CD-ROM technology for the SNES. The audience was shocked. Confusion rippled through the crowd. For Sony, it was a betrayal of the highest order. They were blindsided, humiliated on a global stage. Years of work, millions of dollars invested, all seemingly for nothing. The fallout was immediate and severe. The Nintendo-Sony partnership was dead. In the aftermath of CES 1991, Sony was reeling. The betrayal stung. Millions of dollars and countless hours had been wasted. Or so it seemed. But within Sony, a fire was kindled, a desire for revenge. Ken Kutaragi, the engineer behind the PlayStation, refused to give up. He saw an opportunity where others saw defeat. Kutaragi approached Sony's board with a bold proposal. Don't abandon the project, he urged. Instead, go it alone. Create a Sony gaming console. It was a risky move. Sony had no experience in the gaming market. They would be going up against established giants. But Kutaragi was persuasive. He painted a vision of a Sony-branded future of gaming. The board was split. Many saw it as a fool's errand, but Sony's president, Norio Oga, saw potential. He gave Kutaragi the green light. A small team was assembled. They were given a simple mission: turn the failed PlayStation into a standalone console. In December 1994, the PlayStation launched in Japan. It was an instant hit. Gamers were blown away. The graphics were incredible. The games were innovative. Sony had done the impossible. They had created a console that could compete with the best, and in many ways, surpass them. The PlayStation wasn't just a success, it was a revolution. The hardware was powerful. It could produce three-dimensional graphics that were leaps ahead of the competition. Sony courted developers aggressively. They made the PlayStation easy to develop for. This led to a flood of games that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The PlayStation also brought gaming to a new audience. It wasn't just for kids anymore. Sony marketed the console to adults. The PlayStation made gaming cool. The fallout between Sony and Nintendo didn't end with the PlayStation's success. It sparked a rivalry that would define gaming for decades. Nintendo, once the undisputed king, now had a worthy challenger. The competition drove both companies to innovate, to push boundaries. Gamers were the ultimate winners. They reaped the benefits of this corporate battle. Nintendo didn't take the challenge lying down. They doubled down on what made them special. Innovative gameplay, beloved characters, family-friendly experiences. The Nintendo 64 and later the GameCube showed that Nintendo wasn't going anywhere. They carved out their own niche. Different from Sony, but equally passionate, the rivalry pushed both companies to excel in their chosen paths. The impact of this rivalry went beyond just Sony and Nintendo. It changed how the entire industry operated. Third-party developers now had options. The market expanded.